I firmly believe that corporations and governments, which are the only two things that work in trillions, are the two biggest opportunities that we have to fix the problems in society. I'm not an expert on government, but I've worked inside these corporations for 20 years. And I know that because they're comprised of people, that's the Achilles heel of corporations. They're comprised of people like you and me. And if the people in those corporations rise up and say, enough is enough, we are going to take back control of these corporations and we're going to have them do what we want them to do to create this era of abundance and prosperity for all, that is, I think, the hugest revolution that we can hope to see in our lifetimes.
Welcome to the SpaceShip Earth podcast with me, your host, Dan Burgess. This is episode 23. Massive gratitude for tuning in and giving your time to this episode. Before we get stuck into this conversation, just quickly, in the whole podcasting world, if you like this show, if you rate it, believe in what we're trying to do here, then can you give us a review or a little rating or a little cheeky 3-5 seconds on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to this? Would be super useful because A, it's lovely to get a bit of feedback. B, it just helps the podcast surface to more people. So please do share it with those you think might like it. Really trying to power this up now over the next few months. So episode 23. So my guest in this episode is a wonderful human being called Afdhel Aziz. He co-authored a book in 2016 called Good is the New Cool. Market like you give a damn. He is a well-in-demand keynote speaker, and he is the founder and chief purpose officer of a consultancy practice called Conspiracy of Love. Now, the great thing about Afdhel is that he has worked in and for some of the biggest brands on the planet over his career, and what I think is so interesting about Afdhel is it's given him obviously this unique insight into how these big corporations work. His mission today is to solve one of the biggest problems facing companies in the 21st century, is how to find purpose and meaning in the work they do and unlock the power of business to do good in the world. Christ, do we need more of that right now? So Afdhel is a busy chap. If he's not speaking, consulting, he's running his own conferences under Good is New Cool, and he's just a lovely human being. So I was really chuffed to connect with Afdhel at his home in LA via the power of the internet, and this is a conversation we had a couple of months back. I'm going to cut straight to it. This is the SpaceShip Earth podcast, episode 23 with Afdhel Aziz. Afdhel, welcome to the SpaceShip Earth podcast.
Hi, Dan. Nice to connect with you after all these years.
Yeah. Do you know what? I was figuring that out actually this morning. I think I could be wrong. No, I'm pretty sure I was right. I think it was about 18 years ago I first met you.
No.
Yeah.
That's depressing.
Well, because you were, I think it was when you were at Kiss FM.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
that
got
was
to be
a long time ago.
That's got to be, hasn't it?
And you were at Naked.
Yes. It was pre-Naked. It's when I was doing research, and
okay.
I think you guys were embarked. Kiss FM, for those listeners who have no idea what we're talking about here, is was a pretty leading edge, legendary radio brand and station out of London, wasn't it? And I remember. Yeah, so I think I was doing a piece of work looking at kind of youth audiences and the brand and the involvement of the brand, and that's where I first met you, which was about 18 years ago, which is
18 to me. 18 years ago, about 30 pounds lighter and much more hair.
Excellent. And then I think then I connected with you again at Nokia. Because so you went on, because you went talking, and you did some crazy things at Nokia, if I remember rightly.
My goodness, yes. That was at Nokia around the time Nokia was really getting into music and MP3 phones, and so I had the pleasure of launching these phones and across Europe with a series of experiential events called Nokia Trends. We did Nokia New Year's Eve, which was the world's biggest New Year's Eve
That's the
party.
one. Tell me about that one, because I remember this. This is just when you think about it. This would have been, when was this? This was...
Oh, gosh. I think 2007, 2008
Yeah.
New Year's Eve, I think, if memory serves me right.
Yeah. But it was enormous, wasn't it? This was an enormous activation.
This, I think, still holds the record for the single biggest proprietary experiential done by a brand. It was $30 million. And so I don't know if anybody's listening has any idea if that's the biggest, please let us know. But yes, it was this bonkers idea to do one party in 5 cities that stretched over 24 hours with the world's biggest music talent. So it was, the cities were Hong Kong, Mumbai, Berlin, Rio, and New York. The artists were Rihanna, the Black Eyed Peas, John Legend, gosh, a whole bunch more.
Yeah.
All tied together by a live global webcast and a TV show that got produced the next day and pumped out on New Year's Day in like 120 countries or something like that. So yes, by far the biggest, most complex project I've ever done. I think I was chain smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day for 6 months to finish that one.
Because this was the time when sort of Nokia just ruled the world, right? It was like, I mean,
yes.
almost. It was amazing when you think back to that, and actually think, and then you think to today and think, whoa, what happened?
Well, I use it as a lesson as a warning lesson sometimes to think about how companies can go extinct faster than you can imagine. You know, when you and I were working on Nokia, it was world's biggest mobile phone company, 40% of the Finnish gross domestic product, that one company. And 5 years later, it had vanished. And, you know, I think it ties back to the theme of everything I work on now, which is purpose, which is what if it had a higher order purpose and was able to then ideate around that purpose. I always say if Nokia really had a purpose around connecting people, then they could even potentially have gone beyond hardware and started to actually create something like Facebook.
Yeah.
They could have evolved from, you know, hardware to software to social networks, had they had the foresight to ideate, I think, and see around those corners.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fascinating times, and I think there was many of us that were, I mean, so many people were working within the sort of web of Nokia work at that time, or for many years.
It's an amazing company, amazing people inside the company, and it's just, I just think it's one of those moments where you have to really use it as a kind of lesson in how companies need to really innovate and stay abreast of the competition and you know outthink them as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. So you went on from there, and then you went. Was it Absolute from there? Was that?
No, I had the pleasure of working for Heineken in New York City,
right.
and then Absolute. So I spent about 9 years in the kind of alcohol industry in total, and again, lots of cool things going on in music. Did a lot of festival sponsorships and partnerships with Art Basel and things like that. And I think that was a great run, but I think it was actually towards the end of that. You know, to back up a second, I think the thing you have to know about me is that I'm a kid from Sri Lanka who grew up obsessed with pop culture, and that's why I was, when I worked for Kiss, I worked on Mixmag, and the red thread throughout the first half of my career has been working in brands that had a big pop culture component to it.
Yeah.
And I was obsessed by the cool, and one day the cool stopped being cool. And that I say it's kind of like being, in the Roadrunner cartoons when Wile E. Coyote runs off the side of a cliff and his feet are still moving. There's nothing beneath him.
Right.
And that's how I started to feel. I felt like this thing that had fueled my career in marketing for so long was no longer fueling me. And so that's when I went on this 4.5-year journey with my wonderful friend and co-author and partner in business, Bobby Jones, to write this book, Good is the New Cool, Market Like You Give a Damn, to give it its full title.
And that was also, if I'm right, because you mentioned the Sri Lanka, that's your birth country, and something happened as well, right? In that was part of this shift for you.
Yeah, I think anybody's journey to purpose is it's not an instant transformation. There's always moments that happen along the way that really move you on to kind of the next step and the next step. And one pivotal moment for me was being in Sri Lanka. This is in 2004 for my brother's wedding, and being there when the Asian tsunami hit the country, which was a pretty devastating thing to happen to this country that I love. I was safe. I wasn't hurt in the tsunami, thankfully, but a lot of people died. There was a lot of devastation. And I think that was the moment where I started to realize that there was a gulf between what I did for a living, i.e. marketing, and whether it was of any use to the people who've been hurt or harmed or, affected by the tsunami. And there wasn't. And so that was a moment there where there was a seed planted in my head, where I started to think about what was my higher order purpose, even though I didn't have the words to explain it, and that coupled with, other moments where I just started to realize that there was something else that I should do. Writing a book was my way of flushing out that purpose, actually. I realize it now in hindsight. I just decided to go back to my first love, which was writing. I grew up wanting to be a journalist, and I've written books of poetry and fiction novels and things like that. And I just decided to put my journalistic hat back on and go hunting for clues for what could give me inspiration. And it ended up being a book, and that book ended up being the kind of gateway to my new life as a speaker and as a consultant, and just thoroughly enjoying being in the space of helping people inside brands and companies figure out how to make money and do good. I've found that spark again that I had, through music and pop culture, and now that spark is business and social impact.
And that was, it's 2016, right? And the book came out.
Yep.
So that's 3 years ago. When you were, and how long did the book take to, what was the journey like then actually pulling this thing together?
First of all, I'd highly recommend writing a book with somebody else. It makes it much more fun than this kind of lonely endeavor. And Bobby and I were sitting at lunch one day, and he is one of the smartest people I've ever met. He and I used to work together on Heineken. I was his client. He ran Alloy, an amazing kind of multicultural agency there. I would say every time Bobby started speaking, I would shut up and start writing down everything he said. And so we were sitting at lunch one day, and we were both just being brutally honest about how much we were frustrated with our, business as usual. And I just said, "Hey, do you want to write a book with me?" And he's, to my eternal gratitude, said yes. And so we just started calling people up and, doing it in our lunch breaks, sitting in little phone booths, calling people up and saying, "Hey, would you give me 45 minutes of your time just to ask you questions?" And I'm, so grateful to all those people who said yes, even though they pretty much knew that we didn't have a book deal at that point, and we were just faking it.
Nice.
And so the book ended up being a collection of 21 interviews with people that we just thought were world changers, people just doing super interesting things in business and brand and nonprofits and culture. And we found a wonderful agent, Robert Gwinsler from Sterling Lord, who really took a chance on us. We found a wonderful publisher, Regan Arts, who did an amazing job in helping to design the book and make it look cool, which is a huge part of its success, I think. And then, it came out in October of 2016. 3 weeks later, Donald Trump is elected, and we are holding our heads in our hands because we think we've written the worst titled book in the history of timing. Good wasn't the new cool if you looked at the results of the US election.
Brilliant.
But then it was really the reaction to the book after that point that made us realize that we were onto something. And Bobby says, he always says wise things. He said, good is a new cool went from being an observation to a declaration. And we realized that actually it was a rallying cry. And the emails and, calls we started to get from people inside companies who said, listen, this book is really valuable to me. It is a playbook for corporate resistance. It's a playbook for how you can get brands to start thinking about ways to spend their money more wisely and, build brands, make money, and do good all at the same time. So that's what led to me quitting my job at Absolute Vodka on January 1st, 2017, and jumping head first into this new life.
That's a good story. What I'm finding so fascinating with all of this stuff now is the sort of pace that, this whole area of purpose and, business for good, or whatever we want to call it, it's obviously starting to motor, and obviously there's multiple reasons why that's probably happening. But I always remember, actually sitting with my Nokia client probably 10 years ago, when I was doing a lot of work around this kind of sustainability, positioning of the brand. The irony of it now, it's no longer around. But I always remember, like, you'd have these great quotes from thing, which would people go. You'd have people within the business teams who would go, "What's the business case for sustainability?" There was always this sort of, always this sense that doing good things seemed to sort of rub up against doing business. There was always a sense that you couldn't do good stuff in the world and make money. And I know, obviously, that is changing rapidly now as we're seeing more companies that are baking this in from the start. But what have you seen that's shifting since that you got the book out? What do you think it is? And do you have any examples of that where you're really sort of seeing that? Can you understand that kind of, that kind of idea where it was often seen as on the edges? And what do you think's bringing it through now? I'd love to know a bit more about where you sit with that.
Yeah, so the way we talk about it is that we're seeing three tectonic shifts happen all at the same time, which are massively disruptive to doing business as usual. There is shift number one, which is consumers who want to buy products and services from companies that stand up for their values. Shift number two is employees who want to work for those companies now. And shift number three is increasingly investors and the stock market and Wall Street wanting to invest in those companies. So if you're a CEO, you're now getting hit on three different fronts from, forces which are greater than you. One of the leading thinkers in this field, and a man I admire tremendously, is Max Lenderman. He runs a wonderful agency called School in Boulder, Colorado, and he said, purpose is the new digital, which I love. It's this idea that this is going to be as disruptive to business as digital was. And I think, in addition to those forces, I think what you're now also seeing is a realization that business as usual hasn't been working. This focus on quarterly profits and this focus on short-term thinking has led to companies like Nokia we're talking about going extinct faster. And so there's a search for a new sustainability, no pun intended, for companies and their longevity. And that's coming at the same time as people understanding that, hang on a minute, if we actually use clean energy, we save money. If we use, materials that aren't harmful and toxic, and we pay our workers fairly, and, we're good citizens of the planet, we are actually more profitable. And that's coming at the same time as realizing that the idea of tackling some of the biggest problems on the planet are actually huge white spaces, which no one has really ventured into, that can be highly profitable. So my favorite example of a company, who's been doing it really well recently is Adidas or Adidas, depending on which part of the world you're in.
Yeah.
They have really figured this stuff out in terms of how to, do several things very well. So if you look at their collaboration with Pali for the Oceans around the ocean plastic shoe, the sneakers or trainers, These are made from ocean plastic waste. They are now on track to sell 11 million pairs of those sneakers this year at an average retail price of $225, which is, if you do the math, over $2 billion in revenue.
Yeah, no, I've seen the resale value of these things as well. My son keeps showing me like how they go for like four times the price on all these kind of sneaker sites.
Yeah,
it's pretty.
So they have learned how to use the power of cool, because the first thing about those sneakers, and I'm wearing a pair right now, is that they just look cool, right? So they're not like eat your vegetables, save the planet. They're just like objects of desire.
Yeah.
They've been really smart in partnering with the right nonprofits and organizations like Parley to fix this problem. They have committed to stripping plastic out of their entire supply chain by a certain point in the future. I can't remember. It's like 2025 or something like that. And they're now creating new technologies like the Futurecraft Loop shoe, which they announced a couple of weeks ago, which is the first
I saw that.
circular economy shoe, right? So this isn't Patagonia. This is Adidas. This is a company that was fueled by pop culture and who is now realizing that if they link their pop culture, talents to things that can actually have a positive impact on the planet and people, that is a powerful engine, because now you have the engine of capitalism helping to solve some of the biggest problems on the planet. So that to me is the vanguard, where purpose is profitable. That translates to a huge amount of meaning and engagement with their employees, who feel pride to come to work for a company that is solving social and environmental problems. It's attracting investors who want to invest in those kinds of companies and make sure that their money is focused on companies that aren't just profitable, but also helping the world become better. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I'm, especially if you think about the fact that this is also now being built on the backs of two generations, millennials and Gen Z, who have an awful lot of passion for this topic. I don't think it's going away anytime soon, despite what all the naysayers and thought leaders and critics in the marketing and trade press say.
Interesting. And what is it's funny because I've followed the Adidas story very closely, because I've been doing a lot of sort of ocean conservation work the last few years, and so really interested in that whole relationship with Parley and how that's played out. That's a sort of groundbreaking kind of relationship, collaboration, I guess. And I think the collaboration space is super interesting. It's a space that interests me massively, and it's always been seemingly quite hard for companies to really, or big companies particularly, to open up to that kind of open collaboration system, where really quite diverse, different organizations are bringing something quite unique into the mix, and there's a co-creation that's going on. Are you seeing signs of that type of move happening in other big players? Because I think that for me is a signal of real change. That these kind of sort of what I would call unusual suspects, almost.
Yeah, I think it's the short answer is yes. These are some of the clients that Conspiracy is working with, which I can't talk about publicly, but these are major corporations in pretty much every category you can think of. Apparel, CPG, FMCG, technology, travel, who are all waking up to the potential of this. They are all realizing that it's not about the ad campaign. I think that was part of the problem in the beginning. I think purpose got lumped into advertising, and it's a good place for a company to start. I call it chapter 1, where a company states their values in the form of an advertising campaign. But what's really interesting is companies now moving to chapter 2 and going, okay, now we can't just talk the talk, we have to walk the walk. And so whether that is purpose-led technology platforms that are being created, purpose-led new product innovation that is being created, or just companies finding new ways to partner with nonprofits and culture creators to actually create social impact in the world. that's the really rich territory that we are now in the midst of. That's going beyond advertising right now.
Yeah.
It's hard. Innovation inside a large company is hard, and I've been inside large companies. I think partnering with smaller, more nimble startups, to help collaborate, and then you have the best of both worlds of innovation and scale helps. But no, from my perspective, what I'm seeing makes me tremendously optimistic about the future.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I wonder whether, because you're based in LA, right? That's home for you now.
Yes.
So what we're seeing right now in the UK, particularly, but I think it's popping up everywhere. But if we look at the climate story, it's coming really, really hard now. We've had obviously the school climate strikes on the back of Greta Thunberg, but that's sort of getting bigger and bigger on a monthly basis now. We've had the Extinction Rebellion that's emerged in the last couple of months, or even less than that, probably, really, to the forefront. We've had it's suddenly breaking through in a way. I mean, that's a particular issue, but it is an issue which I think more people are realizing is the mother of all issues, because we're starting to understand that finally there's a kind of an awareness shift that ecology owns economy. There's no business on a dead planet.
Good quote.
Yeah,
good
right,
quote.
Right. And so that's starting to come through. And what's interesting, but also challenging about all of this, but what's interesting, I think, is it's kind of forcing a lot of uncomfortable conversations that are starting to happen, and I think it's probably different in the US because of the scale of the country and stuff. But I mean, what's interesting is, and I guess where I'm curious about all of this work is so here there's questions around the question of consumption, for example, is getting louder again. So we've had all these reports coming through on lots of ecosystems collapsing, lots of biodiversity in huge decline, and it's not just seen as sort of climate now; it's seen as actually our sort of overconsumption is starting to take is creating such a strain on our ecological systems. The demand for resources, so I'm interested in that, because I'm interested in how companies are going to respond to this stuff, because that there's something about how you do business and how you go about making your products, but I guess there's also something that's starting to emerge. What is the kind what are the kind of cultural shifts around our relationships to brands going to look like? Are we going to sort of completely reimagine our relationship with these things, or is it just, because I think there's a certain sense of let's just keep on buying and let's keep on using that kind of, brand consumer relationship, but we'll try and do it as ethically as possible. Or will we start to see a shift in how people start to relate to, consumption on more of a day-to-day basis? Will we see a letting go of certain brands and certain categories? Do you know what I mean? I guess these are questions that are sort of down the line, but I'm just curious, because they're certainly coming a lot faster here now than I've ever seen. And I'm seeing people talking about this stuff that you would not imagine talking about this stuff. Do you know what I mean? So how is it in the US, this stuff?
It's a great question. I think we have been stymied here by the fossil fuel industry and its army of lobbyists who have managed to sow discord in the public consciousness about whether climate change is real. And I'm beginning to start to put fossil fuel companies in the same category as arms manufacturers or tobacco companies. Companies which I'm going to find it very difficult to work for in the first instance or consult with, but who are also now actively working to tear the fabric of our society apart, no matter what bullshit they say about green innovation or whatever else.
Yeah.
I think when you look at social issues, there's a wonderful framework which I've learned from an amazing agency here in Los Angeles called Proper Daily. They're featured in the book. They do amazing work with Clinton Foundation and various other nonprofits and foundations. And they have a three-step methodology, a three-phase methodology that they look at in terms of how social issues, evolve. And if you look at any issue from ocean plastic to, marriage equality, you can see, I think, the same shift. Phase one is awareness, where the majority of the population becomes aware of the issue. Phase two is attitude shift, where the majority of the population then change their minds and start to have a common consensus around the issue, whether it's marriage equality is great or ocean plastic is bad. And then three is behavior shift, where then people actually change their everyday behavior. I will not buy plastic anymore. I will actively vote to support marriage equality. I think the problem with climate change, and by the way, we should stop calling it climate change. That just sounds like we're going to the Mediterranean for a nice holiday.
Right.
I call it the climate apocalypse.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a much better way to frame what's about to happen.
Yeah, and climate breakdown is now coming through as the way, you can feel that terminology is starting to
we should just call it climate holy shit, we're all going to die, right? So let's stop messing around.
Yeah.
The problem is the fossil fuel industry and the politicians in who they have under their control have sowed enough discord and confusion about this topic, despite all the scientific research, that we've not gotten past stage two.
Yeah.
So there's a tremendous amount of awareness, right? An inconvenient truth and, just the general awareness of it. There hasn't been the attitude shift, which will then lead to a massive behavioral shift. So because people still can hold on to excuses like, well, it's just natural cycles, or it's it's not man-made. There's climate change, but we didn't cause it. All this bullshit, that is prohibiting it from moving into stage three, where we're all going, okay, we're all aware there's a problem. Yeah. We all agree this is a huge problem and that we caused it. Now let's start doing something about it. Let's start dismantling this fossil fuel economy that is slowly poisoning us and our children. And the good news is that we have all the alternatives right here to fix this problem. We have, there's a famous line from, if you remember that old TV show, The $6 Million Man.
Oh God, yeah, Steve Austin. Remember him?
We have the technology to fix him. Remember that line?
Yeah, I do.
We have the technology to fix this. We have clean energy, we have, carbon sequestration, we have regenerative agriculture. We have all of those things out there. What we're missing is the collective will of people around the planet to do it. And that is why I'm so in awe of the young people who are leading the charge on this. And I think we need to go help them. I think we need to go get their backs.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. I've been on a couple of, as my 14-year-old son said to me the other day, he said, "Dad, we've been on 4 protest marches this year, and I'm only 14. What's going on?" And and I was saying, exactly that. And I actually went and the last climate march in Bristol last month. I went out and just took my mic with me and just chatted to a bunch of students on the street just to figure out where what was going on in their heads and why they were doing this. And absolutely, you're absolutely right. I think everyone I spoke to did not want to be seen as the solution, and was really scared, and certainly didn't like this kind of part of the media that was sort of saying, the kids are rising, they'll sort us all out kind of vibe. They were like, we need the adults to step up with us.
Absolutely, yeah. So I do think when it comes to corporations that I wrote this article as part of my Forbes series of articles, which are called The Power of Purpose. I wrote one which the headline was "Abundance is the New Sustainability." And I love this idea of abundance, which was first put forward by Peter Diamandis, who's the founder of XPRIZE and the Singularity University. He wrote a book called Abundance and another follow-up, Bold, both of which are amazing books. Everybody should read them. And in it, he said, listen, the good thing is because of all of this technological revolution that we're seeing around clean energy, 3D printing, biochemistry, AI, robotics, we're now going to be in a position where we can create more than we need. We can serve the needs of not just the bottom billion, but the coming billions of people that are going to be on this planet. And we can find ways to feed them, nourish them, educate them, and scale in ways that we haven't thought possible. And to me, I think this idea of abundance is a much more powerful and aspirational idea than sustainability. Sustainability means just fixing what we broke, just putting back what we took. And so the article really is a call to arms to companies to say, you got to go beyond sustainability. You got to think about how you can be abundant vehicles for the human race, how you should rename your chief sustainability officers into chief abundance officers, and start to think about how you as a company in all of these different sectors that you're in, how you can leave a net positive impact on the world through your people, your products, your processes, and leave it in better shape than we found it. And I think if companies just get out of this short-termism, get out of this kind of horrible cycle that they've gotten themselves into with the focus on quarterly profits, and start to just look up and see the horizon ahead of them, they'll realize that this is a way to future-proof themselves for the future, to make a lot of money. Peter Diamandis has this great quote, the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest business opportunities. But it takes reframing what the company can stand for and what it can do. I firmly believe that corporations and governments, which are the only two things that work in trillions, are the two biggest opportunities that we have to fix the problems in society. I'm not an expert on government, but I've worked inside these corporations for 20 years. And I know that because they're comprised of people, that's the Achilles heel of corporations. They're comprised of people like you and me. And if the people in those corporations rise up and say, enough is enough, we are going to take back control of these corporations, and we're going to have them do what we want them to do to create this era of abundance and prosperity for all, that is, I think, the hugest revolution that we can hope to see in our lifetimes.
Yeah, no, I think that's the whole area that if I have hope for the next evolution of the corporation, it comes from within, because they are, corporations are, probably have more resources than a lot of governments have as well. It's again, I'm sort of going on this climate thing just because it's so live at the moment here for me as well, just in my work. But it's interesting, So last week the UK government have, they've declared a climate emergency. Not quite sure what that means, and obviously that was on the back of all the Extinction Rebellion work and all the work from the school strikes. And obviously, it's a bit like the Paris Agreement. It doesn't really mean anything because it's just a statement. But what's interesting already is, you can see chatter in the business community. Well, what does a climate emergency mean for the business community? What does Extinction Rebellion mean for the business community? Do you know what I mean? So these conversations are kind of starting, and I'm really interested in what you've just said there, because again, for me, if you bring it back to a human level, corporations, brands, whatever we call them, they are things that are made up of people in the background, right? So these are groups of humans that are sort of building these entities and driving these organizations. And so I'm really fascinated in what we're on the edge of. Yeah, because I think either business really and the corporation and all these people within are going to lean into this stuff, and as you say, there's an awakening again, and I think a rising up to something completely different, right? A different set of operating principles, a different set of values, which are absolutely putting the kind of the human and a longer time perspective into all this stuff. I mean, you touched on the sort of the quarterly kind of culture that we've just got into, this mad kind of cycle of results, and and again, you sort of, if you look at what's happening from an ecological perspective, the planet, you could say the planet is it's playing, it's our sort of inability to kind of to operate as the natural world does, particularly I think in things like time cycles, you know, eternal growth, constant growth all year round, which the natural world just never does. Nothing else in nature does what the modern human wants. And so I think even just thinking of how the corporation, how a brand will evolve to a sort of deeper sense of time, you know, a deeper sense of time on this planet, and a deeper sense of time in the, you know, in the products and services and the way that we put stuff out into the market. That stuff may seem sort of but I do feel that that's where it has to go to, right? Because it just feels it's so out of sync now, and we're seeing so much of the feedback now coming from, you know, both from an ecological perspective, from a kind of social perspective, as more people are also suffering in many ways. It does feel we're on this, we're on the edge of something quite interesting in amongst all of this.
I think the great hope I have is the men and women I speak to inside corporations who are determined to take back control from those corporations. Corporations got away from us. They were this thing that allowed us to kind of morally abdicate our values. Oh, it's not me, it's the company. Well, the company is the people. And so what I'm seeing is people saying, hang on a minute, that's not right. We comprise this company. And so we should have a say in what it does and what policies it makes. And what is happening right now is precisely because of the toxicity of the political environment, because of the sense of panic around the environment. The people inside those companies are having a moment of personal purpose that is waking them up. And they're coming to this realization that, you know, there is no they, it's only us. We have to be the ones who save it, you know, save ourselves. And so that is what gives me hope. Is I literally every day I have conversations with people. They could be a junior brand manager, they could be an SVP, sometimes they're the CEO. Sometimes they're lonely because there's very few people inside the company that they feel think like them. And I say, you're lonely because you're on the vanguard. You're lonely because you're out in front. And that's what leaders have to do. And our job is to help equip you with the right business case, ROI, narrative, story, imagination to help make this happen. But it's no surprise that this awakening of purpose is happening and accelerating precisely at the moment when the social fabric is getting torn apart. So that is the thing that I cling to as giving me hope that this isn't just a marketing fad or a, you know, flash in the pan. It's these leaders inside these companies who are the ones who I know are going to succeed in the long run, and who are now taking back control of these corporations and saying, we're going to have you work for us, for everybody, for all the stakeholders, not just the shareholders in the stock market. And we're going to do it in a way that's driven by ingenuity and innovation. And we're going to help this company make a lot more money because that's what companies are there to do. But by making a lot more money, we're going to do a lot more good. And that, I think, is brilliant. And that's why I wake up every morning and I sign up for this stuff. And this is what I'm going to be doing for the next 40 years of my life.
What do you think? That's interesting. You were just saying there, like in terms of the, you know, occasional loneliness of those kind of like driving a more kind of purposeful future for a large, you know, global business. What do you sense are the biggest challenges for those on this journey inside? Where do you sense that people are really looking for help?
Well, that's kind of why we started doing the Good is the New Cool conferences, you know, which we did in Los Angeles earlier this year, and we're going to announce other cities soon. Watch this space, because we realized they were a gathering place for people, like-minded people, you know, across all these different sectors to get together and go, oh, I'm not alone. There are people like me in every single large corporation on the planet, in every Fortune 500 company. We just don't know each other. And now they have a network of support. And now they have people they can call up and go, hey, I'm having this problem. You know, I don't quite know how to pitch this idea. Or, you know, that is, I think, when we talk about a conspiracy of love, which is the name of the social impact consultancy, that is the conspiracy of love that we're trying to create between all of these people, and create allies between them so that they can work together. I think the biggest problem is that, especially when it comes to brands and marketing, which is the space you and I came out of, we are trapped in the short-term cyclical nature of the media and advertising cycle. If 90% of a brand's budget goes towards media and advertising, and all that machine can do is pump out, beautiful anthemic TV spots or, advertising, how do we get that money to be diverted into things that actually do good? And by the way, we could do a whole separate podcast on the sheer waste inside the media industry. This is going to be the next big scandal that breaks. This is the next big short. The reality of how much of a brand's dollars actually make their way to a consumer. If you go and do some digging and find out the statistics, they're absolutely blood-curdling. So these brands are spending money on things like advertising, which at best consumers try and avoid, right? With ad blocking, ad streaming, ad free streaming, etc. At worst, aren't getting seen by anybody. They're getting seen by bot farms somewhere else on the planet, but not by real human beings. How do we take that money and put it into doing good? And how do we put those into, there's a great agency here, Activista, who say acts, not ads. How do we put them into acts? And then how do we surround those acts with great content and storytelling and PR and social media and digital and retail and all that good stuff with all the tools of marketing? But at the center of it is actually something that does some good in the world. I think their biggest problem is they're fighting against a machine that has trained us to, as marketers, only do one thing, which is to create advertising, when the solution cannot be advertising. We have to go beyond advertising and find real solutions to some of these real problems in the world.
Yeah, I'm completely behind that. I've found myself over the years, not as eloquently as you just put it, but trying to sort of explore that with clients, and this idea, again, in my sort of simple layman's way, it's like in a world now that's so networked and so connected, that if you put a little bit of money into doing something awesome in the world, right? Actually trying to, co-create something or working with people on the ground around an issue that, really genuinely matters, and there's a clear connection to your business, then chances are it's going to get eyeballs, right? That that action, that ability to go out there and have a go at something with people. And that, again, it sort of excites me, the potential of that, because you think, if you can start to play with shifting this kind of way of marketing into actually just going out there and actually trying to crack stuff, solve stuff together, make stuff happen. And on the back of it, if we can sell some wonderfully made products, then fantastic, right?
Yeah.
I
think that, like in the case of Adidas, we've talked about before, the product is the message.
Yeah.
Right? The product is the message. You surround it with great marketing, as they have done. That is where I want to see the creative firepower of the creative agencies, advertising agencies, media agencies, the clients. I want them to shift their attention from trying to prop up this broken model of advertising, which we all know isn't working anymore. I compare it to like a zombie on The Walking Dead, which just keeps going despite all of the pieces of it falling off. And instead shift to this new model where I say we need to start treating the world as the canvas, not this tiny screen. We need to think about people, not pixels, as being, the most important thing at the center of it. And we need to get in there and solve problems in an imaginative, innovative, ingenious way, in a way that gains us that brand love that all these brands hope for. A conspiracy of love, we say brands have to give love to get love. You can't just expect somebody to love you if you don't love them back. And so the articulation of that love cannot just be an ad. It has to be how you show up in people's lives, and with your products and with the marketing experience around your products, you're helping add value to their lives. that's when people talk about you in social media. That's when people talk about, leaving positive Amazon reviews or positive Glassdoor reviews if they're working at those companies. All of that is the brand today. We live in an era of radical transparency, and that is the brand, not some 4-second YouTube pre-roll that you hope will make a dent in someone's consciousness by disrupting a perfectly wonderful experience they're having, and sticking your hand up and begging for attention.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Who would you like to see, thinking about good as new cool and that whole approach that you're building? Are there brands or categories out there that you're like, come on guys, this stuff's right for you lot? Who would you like to see stepping much more into the frame in this space?
Well, I think the biggest opportunity right now is for the big tech companies to step up. And Lord knows they are in the receiving end of so much criticism, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
I think the big four, so Google, Facebook, Amazon, I always forget, I think they need to step into here's what we're going to do to help fix these problems. We're not just going to say, don't be evil and pretend that's it. Here's how we're going to show up with our trillions of dollars to help people in the world as well.
That's brilliant. Listen, man, just where can people find your how do people get involved? What should we be looking out for? Where can I point people to follow your good work?
Sure. So they can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, Afdhel Aziz, and then if you go to goodasnewcool.org, you can find out more about the book and the conferences, and www.afdhelaziz.com for any of the speaking stuff.
I'll stick all that in the show notes.
Cool.
Listen, great to talk,
Cheers,
man.
mate.
Be in touch soon.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate you taking the time. I'll see you soon. All right, bye-bye.
So that was Afdhel Aziz. Good is the new cool. Conspiracy of love. A fine human doing amazing things in the world. He's a proper crew member of the SpaceShip Earth, is Afdhel. Check his work out, follow what he's up to. I think he's just done a couple of conferences out in Australia. Follow this man. He's shaking things up, which is great to see. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. If it sparks any questions, thoughts, whatever, please do reach out. Dan@thespaceship.earth. Or you can get me on Twitter @DanSolo, Instagram @DanSolo. So yet again, if you like what you're hearing, please share the show with anyone else you think might like it. Give us a rating or a review on Apple or Spotify or Acast. It all helps. I'm definitely on the hunt for someone to help me with a little bit of editing. As you can tell, I don't really edit a lot. It's pretty much the conversation that I have. But even just top and tailing these conversations takes time. And I've got loads of other things I'm trying to do. And I really want to get this podcast going weekly if I can. That'd be the idea. I've got a backlog of conversations, and I've got a load more stocking up to do, and so I'm after a little bit of help. I don't reckon it's a lot. It's probably like an hour's work per podcast, and I've got absolutely no cash right now, but things are moving, things are happening, so I may be able to pay something soon. But if that is of any interest, I can't speak, please reach out. I'd love some help. I've also been thinking about do I sort of patron this podcast and try and get backers to help me sort of support the costs of it. I don't know. Open to people's thoughts on that one. So anyway, folks, remember, there are no passengers on SpaceShip Earth. We are all crew. Until next time, look after yourselves. Peace and out.